Welcome to the Tapestry podcast, where fashion stories are woven one thread at a time. I'm your host, Ina Korobkina, actress who played Luda in Dawn of the Dead, that pregnant chick who succumbs to a zombie scratch and gives birth to a zombie baby. So ironically, I have come back to life to birth this podcast, dedicated to exploring the blossoming world of creativity and beauty amidst the AI revolution. This program is brought to you by Jewel Branding Studios, a style consulting agency that helps you tell your unique story, one creative outfit at a time. Cordelia Gaffar, welcome to the Tapestry podcast. I'm so happy you can join me today.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here.
I usually like to start off my podcast by reminding my audience and letting my guests know that this podcast is dedicated to sharing fashion stories and discussing the transformative nature of clothing. And I also have this theory that finding our authentic style, it is a series of moments that are woven together to create this rich tapestry that is our unique life. And so today I'm super curious to learn about your most memorable fashion moments and how they color your work as a teacher of joy and Tantra. Now, before we dive into learning more about what sort of pieces are in your wardrobe as a teacher of joy, what sort of things that you turn to and what is your daily uniform, I would love to dive deeper into learning what exactly Tantra is and how you got to study Tantra and then start teaching it to others. So what is Tantra? Let's start there.
Tantra is the interweaving of light with form and sound. And so your form is your body, the light is our spirit, and sound is our voice. I was drawn to Tantra because I had just left my marriage where I suffered emotional abuse and my wires were frayed. So I needed, something to put me back together again. And of all the things that I had been nurturing over my life, my one thing was my sexuality that I hadn't. And of course, I went to the Islamic tradition first, right? But we don't have schools anymore. But I was able to find a lineage-based school in Tantra. And so that's what I chose. And I found so much personal joy that I wanted to share that with others. So I was already an emotional wellness coach, but adding the Tantra element just made it that much. I feel like my clients, they just had a much better response, infusing Tantra with emotional wellness. And for myself personally, I found like my healing from my marriage, I was married for 20 years, was so rapid. I actually reclaimed my wholeness and my joy really rapidly. So that's how.
So how long has the tradition of Tantra been around?
Yeah, Tantra's been around as long as people have been around. So, thousands of years.
Right.
And I mean, for me, just understanding that my true infinite self has connection to source and just through using my breath and then, of course, syncing my breath with my partner, if I choose a partner, right? Then we're also connecting to infinite source. In any given moment, even if you're not in a sexual partnership, right? We're in partnership when we walk down the street because people are being attracted or distracted or repelled by your energy. So we're always, in this interplay of connecting or not. And so, I would say Tantra is interwoven into everything human, like it's what makes us human. And that's why I call people to their joy, because it's like we're made for bliss and everyone should feel this way and everyone should be able to connect in this way.
So you come from, you were raised in the Islam tradition, and then you went to study Tantra. How are the two similar?
Tantra is a Sanskrit word, right? So most of the things in the Islamic tradition are in Arabic. Now, there are a lot of things in the Islamic way of being that incorporate many things, right? Because Muslims are not all Arabs. And so one of the things that is important in Islam is the sexual relationships of spouses, right? So you're supposed to make sure that your wife in particular is pleased, right? Because Islam recognizes that the anatomy of a woman is such that she is multi-orgasmic. So, but we don't have any schools that teach that anymore. So what used to be taught to the first generations of Muslims is no longer taught to Muslims now. So if you want to find out, what you're supposed to be doing in the bedroom as a Muslim, you have to learn Tantra. Even though Muslims did write a whole encyclopedia on erotology, like eroticism, right? And sexology in the 9th century. But we don't use it. So that's how I ended up.
Oh, so that was the closest thing that you found
Yes.
to, okay. Yeah, because I think most people assume Tantra, as soon as you say the word, they assume exotic bedroom positions. And we've spoken about this before on another podcast that I co-hosted, is that was something that in the 1920s, Westerners came to India to study Tantra. And there's so many layers to Tantra that you learn. The only thing that they took away from the whole experience is the whatever happens in the bedroom, and everything else got left behind. And so I think nowadays when we say the word Tantra, it's whatever's happening in the bedroom. But it's a way of life, and it is being in the moment, and like you said, weaving of light and sound and spirit. It's just, you described it so beautifully. So it's basically a spiritual way, a very deep, meaningful way of approaching life.
It is.
And one of the ways to practice that is in the bedroom. Is basically what they're teaching.
Yeah, like 1/5 of the whole thing is in the bedroom.
1/5. And okay, so what about the clothing? What did they say? Oh, at that point, because you think bedroom, lacy underwear, but back then they're basically, you're naked.
Yeah. Well, actually, you do kind of like the way I dress in Bali. It's like a sarong, so you do have something coverings. So you're not actually supposed to be completely exposed. You do have cloth over you.
Oh. And what kind of, you said a sarong, which is a type of a wrap skirt, right?
You probably see me wear this on some of my
yes.
posts. And this is all I'm wearing usually. So I just like take it and wrap it around.
Oh.
Yeah. So you see,
so it's a piece of cloth, a beautiful print.
Yeah.
And when you wrap it that way, it's a standard size, so it hits most people around the knees, I would imagine.
Yes. Yes.
That's so simple. Oh my gosh,
right?
I'm inspired. That's it. Somewhere's here that I'm getting sarongs.
Yes. And like I said, like if you use it, like you don't have to, you can expose parts at a time, but not all of yourself. So that's
right.
part
Leave some mystery.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
I love it too. And so sometimes I'm just like, do I want to put on clothes today? But I don't really dress like that outside unless I'm in Bali. But like in America, I usually, I do have to wear clothes.
I mean, yeah, our environment shapes us. Our environment kind of dictates what we are going to wear. And sometimes it's sad because the environment we find ourselves in is not inspiring. So I guess the answer there is to find a new environment.
Yes.
Or do you stand out to the point where people stare and it's like, who cares? I don't care if people stare. I'm being my authentic self.
Sometimes people stare and I don't care, I think it's good for them, kind of like you're supposed to look at grass and pretty trees. Sometimes you have to see a human who's light you know?
Oh, that's so beautifully said. Yes. And that it's sometimes there's that fear. It's like, oh, I'm going to stand out. I'm going to be too bright, or I'm going to not fit in. But that's okay if you don't fit in. You might inspire someone who've been aching and wanting to explore something different from what they're wearing and everybody else around them is wearing. Like, we live in such a uniform world where you look at a magazine and this is what the trend is, and then everybody jumps on that trend, and then everybody ends up looking the same. So having that courage to stand out and be your authentic self and just play and express yourself, I think is a powerful act of creative rebellion. So thank you
Yeah.
for reminding me of that.
I feel like I'm being a teenager again. Remember, I was telling you in high school, I wore like a different style every day. And so I pretty much do that now.
You've reclaimed your joy from your childhood. I mean, that's the ultimate goal in life, right?
Yeah.
I think when we're little kids, we're very playful and we have more access to that joy. And somewhere along the way, we lose that joy. And part of this podcast is exploring the connection between the clothing that we wore when we were younger and tapping and how we tapped into the joy of expressing ourselves, our authentic selves through dress. And then the process of potentially losing our authentic self, because many of us just get disconnected from that source, that joy, and then reclaiming it. So did clothing play a part in your journey of reclaiming your joy? And if it did, what kind of clothing did you turn to tap into your joy?
Yeah. So we talked about this on your other podcast. Once upon a time, well, I mean, I'm Muslim, but one of the other things that happened after I got a divorce is I stopped wearing hijab. So I converted to Islam, not for my husband, but just a year into our marriage. And so for 21 years, I wore hijab and abaya and everything. And then just like 3 years ago, it was about this time of the year.
Only 3 years. Wow.
Yeah. So like 3 years ago, I was like, I used to broadcast my podcast live, and I came back from commercial break, and I had taken off my hijab, and I said, you don't have to adjust your screen, but yes, I've decided to experiment with not wearing hijab, and so at that time, I think, was it that year? Yeah, maybe it was that year. I did my photo shoot, and I was wearing this dress showing my shoulders. You know what I mean? And along with, of course you can see my hair, but then also it stopped above my knee. So, and I'm wearing these hot pink heels, Yeah.
What was that like? What was that experience like? Because we had an opportunity to speak on my other podcast that I co-hosted with my girlfriend Ingrid J. Monday, and we talked about Tantra and we talked about your experience with a hijab. What was the experience like starting to wear the hijab? Because I think you touched upon it briefly back when we spoke before. And then what was the experience like when you took it off? I mean, I'm sure it was. Because it's an old like there's an old part of you and there's the new part of you. So when you are revealing yourself to the world for the very first time after wearing and covering up for so long, it's almost like you're revealing a new you. Did it feel like that?
It did. It's funny because I guess 24 years ago now, right? I chose, like, on my birthday, I was like, okay, I'm going to take on this new way of being. And I took my shahada, and I had already bought my abaya and my hijab. And I was like so proud of myself. I was like, you know what? I'm always elegant no matter where I go. Like, I can have like pajamas on underneath, but nobody would know because the abayas are so pretty and the hijab, like the different colors. And so I really loved wearing that. I thought it was so elegant, so easy, instead of, taking hours to do the things that I had to do, because I didn't have locks back then either, right? So it's like I had to do my hair, it was a lot of doing. And so, and I was having kids back then, so it was like very easy. But eventually, when the kids got older, like, I couldn't wear the long abayas, so they were starting to get ripped up. So I had to start, shifting and wearing tunics. And then I didn't think it looked so modest because some of the stuff, sometimes I was pregnant, sometimes I was a little bit thicker, and so you could still see the form of my body. So a lot of times I was just like, whatever. And it's not like people don't catcall you with the hijab on. Did you know that? Like, yeah, I was like,
The people can, sorry, say again. People can't do what with hijab
no,
on?
people catcall you. Like,
Oh,
yeah.
well, I think also you mentioned that you chose to wear a hijab a few days after the 9/11, and you saw fear in people's eyes when they came across you
So it was actually 2 months before 9/11.
2 months before.
Yeah. And, but yeah, so there was that period where people were afraid of me. And then there were there are other stories, right? When I was with my kids also. And, like my little boy, he was a little boy, you know what I mean? And he knocked stuff over in the grocery store and people would, like look at me like those people. And sometimes people would actually say that. So you see how they let their kids act, right?
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to figure out what 5-year-old boy doesn't do that. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. And so since I've taken off my hijab, though, I've noticed that I'm almost invisible sometimes. Yeah, because I'm black. I'm just black. Right. Now I'm just some black woman with locks.
It's
But
amazing
yeah.
how a piece of clothing can create so much emotion and such response. Now, I think a lot of people would assume that wearing a hijab is not part of women's liberation, right? I think would that be a misconception that it's been forced upon a woman to cover up? And I think a lot of feminists would think that it's a part of like hiding the female form. Now, is that a misconception? Like, what's the real reason? What does Islam teach about clothing? Let's dive into that.
Okay. So Islamically, men and women are supposed to, first of all, guard their gaze, which means like don't be looking at each other. If you look at someone, it's because you're having a conversation. And second of all, when it comes to clothing, men and women are supposed to cover that. Well, the men have to cover the top of their heads, but the women cover their beauty. And so the beauty is considered, right? Your hair, your décolleté, and, your everything except for your hands, right? Because you have to use those, and your feet, right? So you want it, but everybody's aura or the chest area, like including the navel and the waist, like that has to be covered for both. And the idea is you don't want the form to be apparent, whether you're a man or a woman. Okay.
Now, the
And
face is not covered for a woman. I think there's a misconception because there's a hijab and there was another piece of clothing, then I forget the name of it, but then the
niqab.
face is fully covered.
So this was actually a designation that was only for the wives of the prophet, peace be upon him, because they were considered like the royalty, right? They're the mothers of the believers. So the women that choose to do that, right? They choose to do that because that's their aspiration for their way of being, right? So they want to be like the scholarly woman, the leader, the guide for education, and respected, right? And of course, appropriate and modest. So the women, the wives of the prophet actually were the first teachers when he died, right? And it's because of them that we even have a Quran, because they put it together, right? So there were verses, but everything was always shared orally, But
So the face is covered. So what's
yeah,
really important is the teachings, it's the sound.
yes,
Oh, interesting.
yeah. So yeah, that's why it was never written because of the. You see, so that's why I say like everything's tantra, because even like there's an understanding about the different chambers of the mouth and the different muscles and how the sound comes out. Like we know this in Tibetan Buddhist chanting. It's similar, right? To the way they recite Quran, similar to the way that they recite the Torah, similar to the way that they recite the Gita. You know what I mean? So that's why I say this is the spiritual part of humans. So all of our sound, right, is always, yeah. I know I'm like going back and forth between
No, no, no.
closing.
This is so fascinating because I know nothing about this, and I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. Now, so where along the way did the hijab come to be known as a clothing of repression?
It is a piece that's associated with oppression, but there's a couple of reasons for that. So a lot of the slaves in America were Muslims, right? So they wanted to cover. But then when, that piece was taken away from them as a punishment, right? But later on, there were actual laws because, like in Louisiana, where Black women were told to cover their hair, like they had to, because the white women were getting upset that their husbands kept taking on the Black and Creole women as their concubines, right? Or mistresses because they fell in love with their beautiful hair, right? So now the women, they covered their hair, but guess what? If you're a very artistic person, what are you going to do with a wrap? So it got worse. You understand?
Oh my gosh, I did not know this. This is
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. So this was like the 1800s, like full on during slavery. So first, recording of the hijab being forced on people, there was a law here in Louisiana forcing Black women to cover their hair. And then the second is, I would say, in the 1900s when I forget the different sect, but these sect of Muslims who took over Saudi Arabia, right, after they discovered all their oil, they forced women to cover their entire bodies and dress like the women of the Prophet, right, with the niqab. But women, don't have to cover to that extent. They, like I explained to you, like literally in the Quran, it describes jilbab is what it's called for men and women, right? It's a modest covering. And so there is no stipulation for covering face, and there's not even about color, right? And Black, as long as you have white underneath it, in the desert actually works as a reflector. I don't know if you know that the Tuareg people, they actually use these wool and they have white under the dark color, right? So I like that we get to interweave.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, so there's no reason why the women should cover like that. So that is the second instance of it being oppressive. And then there are areas, right, in various parts of the world, to my personal knowledge, just in Southeast Asia, right, where they separate the women from the actual learning of Quran and the actual learning of Islam. And they tell the women, what they want them to know of the religion. And that's the other places where women are, forced to wear hijab.
So what was once a piece of clothing that was associated with knowledge and deep reverence and
Choice.
a tradition
Yeah.
has now become a piece associated with repression.
Because of
Interesting.
humans.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how the traditional teachings get misconstrued. So you become a teacher of joy. How does your wardrobe change? Or underneath, do you always, underneath the hijab, you always dress joyfully? It's just now you're showcasing it to the world to see.
Yeah. Number two. I
Number
was,
two,
and
you're
you know,
always in pink and bright colors. So as a teacher of joy, you turn to bright colors, I'm assuming. And
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, it's funny. I wore every color except for red. And then in the end, I started wearing red, you know? Um, and so when I stopped wearing hijab, the first thing I noticed, I had so many V-neck shirts. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to show that much of my, neckline. But but other than that, right, I did go for the bright colors. So, like pink, still red, yellow, orange, a lot of orange in the beginning. I think I did wear a lot of orange. And then I found this beautiful blue that looks great on me.
Warm and inviting, bright colors, joyful. Yes. So when you work with someone that wants to reclaim their joy, they feel stuck in life and like life doesn't have meaning and it's lackluster. They start working with you. Do you see a progression in how their wardrobe changes, how they start showing up differently? Like what are the changes that you see?
Yes, you're making me remember this one woman. She was like, she never wore makeup. But one session, she was just like, you know, you have a different lipstick for every shirt color you wear. She's like, how do you do that? And I was like, I don't know. I said, you don't often wear lipstick. Do you wear lipstick to work? And she's like, I don't. And I said, well, why don't you go and buy some lipstick? Right. And I'm thinking she's going to keep it like, she was very earthy. Right. I will just say that. Next session, she comes with this pink lipstick and like this blue, like a bright blue and white striped dress. I was like, did you go shopping? And so, yeah. And over time, she just changed her whole wardrobe. Like even the way she went to work, and she started wearing mascara and lipstick to work. So, yeah.
And that went hand in hand with her transformation of tapping into her joy.
Yeah.
I love that. What is your earliest childhood memory that's linked to clothing and feeling joyful around clothing?
Wow. Oh, I had a Cinderella dress.
You did?
I did. And it was really my Easter dress. But I picked it because back in my day, they still had petticoats under the dresses, the flouncy ones.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to give it more volume, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm pretty old. But oh my gosh, I love that dress. And then I had the little ballerina Mary Janes. And yeah, I would dance around. Like in our foyer, we had a mirror wall, and I would just dance in that wall. So yeah.
Do you feel like when teen years came around that you kept your authentic style to yourself, or did you feel like you started dressing to impress others and trying to fit in?
Oh no, I was my own person fully. When I was 14, I made my own outfit. And it was like purple, right? That was my first time wearing purple. And I really liked prints. So I couldn't get the collar right, but I made like a shirt that kind of came as close as I possibly could to his like ruffled pirate looking shirts, right? And then I had, what are they called? Remember those long, they've actually start coming back. They're like, you look like a flying squirrel, right?
Oh,
Basically.
like a dolman sleeve. A
Yes, that's the word I'm
dolman
looking.
sleeve.
Dolman
Yeah.
sleeves. So I made a dolman sleeve jacket that matched it. And I used to change my makeup every day. Look, I wore hijab one day a week. And like every single day I had a different look. So Yeah, and I actually started fashion designing and selling some of the clothes, and that's actually why I learned French. But anyway, but I didn't end up going to France. I didn't end up going to fashion school at all. And so I think I lost my authentic self, not in high school. No, it was like, and it wasn't in
Oh,
college either because I turned into like my real, true, authentic self. It was actually when I left college and I came to Washington, D.C., and I worked on Capitol Hill. The wind got knocked out of me. Man, like massage noir, you know what I mean? It was just like, we will not allow you to be anything but us.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you had to fit in.
Yeah. Yes.
My gosh, your tapestry is so unique and different and vibrant. There's just so many different aspects to you, or it's almost like you've lived a million different lifetimes.
Yes. Yes,
Wonderful.
definitely. And see, if you ever come with me to Bali, you see I dress different there too. So,
I love that. Yes, you do. So tell me a little bit about your retreats, because I know, so you do group sessions with women who are trying to reclaim their joy. What are some of the things that you do in order to help women tap into their joy?
yeah, so specifically, I work with women who have suffered emotional abuse, right? So either at work or at home. And so their entire bodies are just, like they're frayed wires. So the main thing that I love to do is bring them to Bali because volcanic islands have a way of just piecing you back together, you know, because when you suffer emotional abuse, there's so much fire inside, but we have never been allowed to admit our rage. And that rage is so sacred. So they get to go there and, let themselves erupt. And so for 7 days, we just work through all the different chakras and let their explosions come out and their sadness come out and get to be with it. And it's kind of like edging. Then they find their joy. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yes, and you do somatic breath work. So I think you mentioned before that there's just tapping into your breath and in the moment
Yeah.
finding that joy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's when you're a victim of emotional abuse, your nervous system is frayed. You're on edge, like you said, and so it's calming that nervous system and just recalibrating. And so I imagine on that island and Bali, it's just such beautiful group of people, beautiful environment. It just calms your nervous system. And is that enough? Do you like just a 7 day retreat? Do you see a transformation?
I really do. And it's not enough, right? It's a great beginning, right? It's kind of like when you go and you get surgery. This is like soul surgery, right? You get surgery, but then there's some maintenance after the surgery, right? There's aftercare, and then there's sometimes physical therapy, right? So you have to have that emotional therapy, I guess you would say, or somatic therapy ongoing. So, like when they come back, I'm working still with those women. We meet on Monday nights, and because it's great to go someplace and get something done, but then you come back and you have to live and you have to work, and you
Upkeep.
sometimes, yeah,
Yeah. Healing is definitely a journey. It doesn't happen suddenly. And sometimes sabotage comes in. Like I love to talk about sabotage. Like you make progress, you heal, and then something pulls you back and you're into your old ways of being. And then you have to remind yourself, no, that's not healthy. Let me try again. And yeah. So I'm glad that you're there for people to remind them and to guide them through the process because again, it's a process. Healing is definitely a process. Life is a series of moments woven together to create this rich tapestry that is our life. And so I'm so glad that we were able to weave a little story today and dive deep into what you do as a joy goddess and how you help other women reclaim their joy and how clothing can be a part of that. You busted some popular myths about hijab for us today. So thank you for doing that and sharing your wisdom. Now, what is the best way for people to reach you and find you and work with
yeah.
you?
The best way for people to find me is I have a website, which is my name, CordeliaGaffar.com. And I love to play on Instagram. And again, that's, everywhere on social media, actually. I make it so simple, Cordelia Gaffar. But I love to play on Instagram. And I have also a YouTube channel with my podcast on it.
Amazing. I love that. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Ina. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tapestry podcast. Chances are, if you resonate with the content I shared today, you might be on a journey to finding your authentic voice and your unique message for the world. If that is the case and you're navigating speaking in public, then my Styled to Speak program is perfect for you because the outfit we custom designed for you together will help you make the most out of the 7 seconds it takes to make that first impression on stage. Speak with conviction and allow your signature stage outfit to add to that conviction. Visit jewelbrandingstudios.com to learn more. That's JEWEL brandingstudios.com.